All right, today we're going to explore a figure who has become this incredible symbol of hope, especially for those moments when it feels like all other hope is gone.
Have you ever been there? You're facing a problem that's just so huge, so complicated, that you just think, this is impossible.
Well, believe it or not, there's a patron saint specifically for that, for those exact moments. The one people turn to when everything else has failed.
But that's the big question, right? How does an ancient apostle get the job of handling impossible causes? The answer is, well, it's not what you'd expect. It's a story that actually unfolds over 1,000 years, and that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
So yeah, the figure we're talking about is, of course, St. Jude. And his official title? It's got to be one of the most intense in all of Christianity.
I mean, just listen to that. The protector of hopeless, lost, desperate, and impossible causes. We're not talking about the patron saint of finding your car keys here. This is the big one. This is who you go to when the odds feel completely and totally stacked against you.
So, to really get how he earned that incredible reputation, we've got to rewind all the way back to the beginning. We need to meet the man behind the title, Jude Thaddeus.
Okay, so this guy was in the inner circle. I mean, one of the original 12 apostles. He was a first-hand witness to the very beginning of Christianity. But his story didn't end there, not by a long shot. He went on to become a missionary, traveling all over the place with Saint Simon.
And here's a detail I find absolutely fascinating. His other name, Thaddeus, it literally means courageous heart. How perfect is that? It's like it perfectly set the stage for a life spent preaching his beliefs, often in really dangerous places.
Now, his journey, like so many of the early apostles, had a tragic end. It's believed he was martyred for his faith in Beirut, right around 65 AD. And you'd think that's where the story stops, but for Jude, that's really where his legacy was just getting started.
But here's the crazy part. His fame wasn't immediate, not even close. There's this massive gap in the timeline. We're talking over 1,000 years before his reputation, as we know it, really started to form. Just look at these dates for a second. He dies in 65 AD. And then we have to fast forward more than a millennium to even find the next big clues. You start to see major figures like St. Bernard of Clairvaux, a huge deal in the church back then, who was known to be a big devotee.
So that's the key thing to understand here. This whole saint of the impossible thing, it wasn't there from the start. It was a legacy that was built super slowly, piece by piece, by these really important people who lived centuries and centuries after he did.
Okay, so what was the tipping point? What was the one thing that happened that took him from being this relatively lesser-known apostle to the patron of lost causes? Well, the answer to that big question, it all comes down to a 14th century holy woman, Saint Bridget of Sweden. She was famous for receiving what were believed to be divine visions.
And this is the moment it all clicks into place. In one of these visions, St. Bridget said that Jesus himself told her to turn to St. Jude for help. The vision specifically pointed to his name, Thaddeus, that courageous and loving heart, and said that because of it, he would be most willing to give help.
Think about that. It was basically a divine endorsement, and that vision, which got passed down through the generations, is the exact reason why St. Jude became the guy you pray to when you feel like you have absolutely no one else to turn to. And of course, this whole story gets told through art too. Now that we know the backstory, all the symbols you see in paintings of him start to make a whole lot more sense. So next time you see a picture of St. Jude, look for two things. First, you'll probably see a little flame over his head. That's for Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came to the apostles. And second, he's almost always holding a club or an axe, which is a pretty blunt reminder of how he was martyred.
So, let's just recap that incredible journey. You've got one of the original apostles with a courageous heart. His legacy then builds for over 1,000 years. Then bam, a divine vision comes along and locks in his role, turning him into the symbol of hope for desperate times that he still is today.
And all of this really brings us to a final thought, doesn't it? You know, whether you're religious or not, the story of St. Jude really taps into something universal, something deeply human. It really makes you think. Even in our modern world, why do we still look for these symbols of hope when we're up against our own impossible challenges?